And we're live. Welcome everybody to another episode of the weekly FreudenFreude live stream, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader.
Hi everybody, I'm sorry, this is Sandra Corona, and we are coming to you sick. We're sick, but we're here tripping it on.
Sorry, yes, very, very sick, but showed up people, and we hope that we will be able to provide you value. I am Claudia, and we are coaches.
Coaches, yay!
sorry. So I do work with God, I'm really sick people. I work with leaders, entrepreneurs, as well as their teams in tech and beyond.
And I am Sandra. I works with leaders, with young expats and expats. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
So, gosh, we're all over the place. Goodness.
Yes.
Today's topic is helping our minds manage daily life. And I understand, Sandra, that you would like to start us off with a story today. So take it away.
Yeah. So, today I was thinking, okay, so if we're going to help our minds how to manage daily life, I saw an episode today about Star Trek Next Generation, Picard. And in this episode, Diana Troy, they're somewhere in space and they encounter a species that takes over the ship all around. And she loses her ability as an empath. For those of you that don't know, Diana Troy is a woman that is half human and half another species. I can't remember what's the name of her species. I have it almost here, but I just can't get it through. And her ability is to communicate with the mind, with her family and her species, and she can sense and get in contact and in tune with other people's feelings, right? Which helps her be a better consultant and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, she loses her ability. And for a person that relies on that as part of her job, because that's what Diana Troy is, she helps Captain Picard by saying, well, this species is friendly, they have good intentions, blah, blah, this and that. So she realizes that she can't do her job. So she says, I can't do this. And Picard tries to convince her that she can do this. Overall, at the end, what happens is that Diana Troy, as she is studying the species, forced by Picard to use her other abilities, because we forget that even though she is an empath and relies on her empath abilities to connect with others, she has developed other things as a human as well, right? Her human side is what gives her the ability to use her instinct, right? And so as coaches, we rely on our instinct, on that connection that we have as humans living life to be able to understand others. And so she finally realizes this species, with the way that they're behaving, is that they're relying on what comes innate to them, what's natural to them. So they discover how to deal with a species and blah, blah, blah. And she finally recovers her empath. But she realizes that as she gets in touch with her instinct, empathy is just an extra, but it is not what she is all about, right? So take it away, Claudia.
Yeah, so very I think that I actually like the story as it comes about how do we help our brain to manage daily life. I think that we manage daily life the way that we do, also out of habit. And sometimes we do not necessarily explore additional capabilities that we might have. in order to maybe facilitate it or have a larger spectrum of behaviors, a larger skill set, a larger, more open mindset on how we view the situation and the world at large. And you know, and sometimes it takes a little bit of a leap of faith in order to try these things where you, like you said, sometimes you're so close and yet you rely on the same old of how you live your life, right? Just an image, but you know, not a huge life skill, people, okay? But I remember way back when I started using a keyboard for typing at a computer, I looked at the keyboard all the time when I typed. I had never been through formal classes and so on. After a while, I looked some people over the shoulder and where they placed their fingers and how they typed. And I played piano, so it was dexterity wise not that difficult for me to figure out the position of the keyboard. So I wasn't typing anymore with two fingers. And but I was still looking at the keyboard. I felt that this crutch. I didn't feel that I would be able to do it blind. Right? Until one evening, I forced myself to just try. I mean, you're sitting at home in the comfort of your own home, right? You can try it, and if you make mistakes,
you're like nobody's seeing.
Yes. Typing police at your home, okay?
Yes.
And I was perfectly fine to type. It just took that moment of giving yourself even just the idea that it might have been possible, that it might.
Yes.
Yeah. It was just like this one moment where you think it's a believable thing that can happen. Yeah.
Yes.
Those of you guys who play music might notice that you practice a piece and you practice a piece and you keep looking at the sheet music and so on, you know. Sheet music away, and you might be surprised how far you get without the support of the sheet music and how much it has become part of you. And I think that it might be a very large tangent to concrete strategies of how we can our mind live daily life, but I think this awareness of what we're capable of, this mindfulness of how we function, and this awareness of what we could possibly change and stretch just this believable little bit in order to be more capable, more open. We might actually be much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. What do you think?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I was thinking about how they say that when, there's always scientists studying children, and they study them for many, many, many years. And they put them in groups, to say, well, we're going to teach this group how to do this, and this other group this, and then this other group is going to learn nothing. They're just going to go to school normal. And then we'll see how they develop with each skill that they've learned, either through us or through life. And one of the simple studies was how children don't learn, they imitate, right? And sometimes when they imitate, that becomes part of your memory. And our brains are such beautiful, beautiful, incredible wonders that we are yet to explore, to rely on them, on our instinct of what it's telling us to do. For some reason, we've always relied on other things or people to function, where all along the true meaning of what it means to succeed is inside you. Because the same way that you learn how to open a doorknob by twisting it is the same way that when a child is faced with a different door lock, let's say no longer a doorknob, now they have, I don't know, they have to enter the keys. All they have to do exactly is just learn to punch the keys, and now they can open any other door, right? So it's an instinct. You start relating how you learn one thing with another and with another. So you start using those patterns to function. And yet somehow we don't trust our instinct. We don't trust our memories. We don't trust our abilities to tell when something is not going to work. And yet we it, right? Say, for example, you were saying a story earlier about when you were learning how to ride a bike. Go ahead and tell that story, because it reminded me of my own story of another different way. Go ahead, please.
It's pretty much in line with the keyboard story. When I was really little, I had this itty bitty little white bicycle with training wheels. And I was driving with these training wheels, and the training wheels needed to be on because they made me feel like, secure, and I could deal with them
because that's what you knew, right? At that moment, that's all you knew.
That's what you knew. That's what you believed. And this is a big word for us coaches. What we believe to be true does not necessarily need to be true. And this was one of these cases, because one day a training wheel fell off and Daddy wasn't home to fix it. But Claudia wanted to nevertheless continue cruising around the neighborhood on the little white bike. And guess what? It worked. It was a little weird, like having a one-sided training wheel, but I was able to balance just fine. And so there too, that was kind of this happenstance that pushed you a little bit into this uncharted area, right? I really think we believe ourselves capable of certain things, and everything that falls outside of our accepted or perceived beliefs of what we're capable of or not is very uncomfortable to deal with, and we don't go there. We're afraid. We don't want to feel this discomfort. We don't. My cat is playing with the paper. I've got to probably scoot him out if it does finish. Sorry about that. But the joys of Amazon shipping boxes for cats. Yes.
Exactly.
And so we have these boxes in which we live. And this is what I'm capable of, this is what I'm not capable of, which is outside the box, and pushing against these sides of this box, which some people call the comfort zone. Thank you. Naturally, an area of uncertainty, an area of discomfort, because you try new and different things. And but so long story short, before I hand it again back to you, and the story that this kind of reminded you of is that help yourself figure out how to live your daily life by just maybe trying different things. And guess what? Some things you're going to try, you're going to be, hooray, I can do it. And some things you don't. And that's okay. At least you tried. And, if you try 10 things, you might learn more or stretch more in 5 of them or 1 of them. It's still a win. I think that maybe we don't need as much help or convincing or change, painful change, as we think. Maybe we're at the brim, at the cutting edge of new capabilities, as long as we just go for it. And I see this with clients all the time. Yeah, like so close, and sometimes it's a weird, insidious internal voice or barrier that tells no, yes, and sometimes you need this bit of courage to go there and confirm that.
That's right. That's right. I think I was telling you earlier, when you were telling your story about your bicycle, that by accident you lost your wheel, right? And it made me remember when some of us were taught how to ride without those training wheels by our parents or somebody removing that one wheel on purpose so that we can just rely on one. As we learn to rely on ourselves, on our instincts, let's say, for example, in this case, balance, right? Because let's put it in very, it's like evolution, right? When we see the men evolutionizing, you see them as a monkey and then they start growing up and then suddenly we're straight and all that kind of stuff. Well, imagine you learn how to crawl, then you learn how to walk, and then you learn how to jog and all this kind of stuff. Well, I think riding a bicycle, we don't think about all the things that riding a bicycle teaches us. How we use our bodies and the things that we learn to ride a bicycle, such as getting on something, using our legs to pedal, and then on top of that, using our balance. Nobody tells us, use your balance. I mean, parents tell you, use your balance, and you're like, wow, what in the world is balance? But you know that they're doing this, so you stand up straight, right? And you start learning that somehow balance means stand up straight and follow, the bicycle and all that kind of stuff. The same way that Diana Troy learned that even though she didn't have her empath ability anymore at that moment, she learned to rely on her instinct. Well, in this case, you learn to rely on your gravity center, right? You use your equilibrium so that you can ride your bicycle without that tire. And it made me remember, yes, when I was learning how to ride eventually without the training wheels, I would be on the side, right? Riding like this, my bicycle, until one day my dad said, you no longer need it because without you realizing it, you're no longer using that last wheel. And you're like, oh my God, and how does that feeling, go for you? It's so emotional. And I think if we actually start thinking about the people that have believed in themselves is a reason why we have all these companies, people that create tech, people in the industry, the food industry, they started somewhere and they took that knowledge. I bet you that somebody said, I've learned how to do all this. What if I took the chance to start my own company? They believed in themselves and they started the company. Well, I'm not going to say that we all have that ability, but each one of us has the ability to do one little thing at a time if we just believed in ourselves. And I was watching Kevin Hart. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a comedian. And he was being interviewed the other day where he was saying, it's so sad when you see how many people give up so fast and so quickly. And incredibly, we never really ever realize how close those people were to achieve their goal. But they got tired and they thought, I'm never going to achieve this. And it's so sad because they were this close. And you know how they realized? Because they suddenly realized what they were doing wrong. And that's the moment that they realized that they gave up too fast. So
yeah, like you said, they get tired, but sometimes they get scared. They get discouraged of maybe their own expectations or other people's expectations about how quickly things are supposed to happen and how grand the innovation has to be and so on, rather than just staying steadfast. And this goes into the whole bit of resilience and stick stick-to-itiveness and backbone and willpower and all that kind of stuff, which we will talk about, maybe during some other episodes. But it is definitely part of this management daily life, because stuff is not always going to go straight, and the proverbial stuff happens, and it's just part of life. I think that the expectation that everything worthwhile is supposed to be coming easy because it's worthwhile, it's not really the way that it happens. I think that stuff is going to go haywire, and how we cope with that, what coping mechanisms we use, what mindset skills we use, how we think about failure, our relationship with repeated mistakes and failures and things like that, and from others and so on. That's the whole topic of resilience, and actually dedicating part of one episode a month to the topic of resilience. So hopefully you'll be able to listen in on some of that. We talked a little bit about the self-awareness, about stretching the comfort zone and trying to get some new skills and so on, being mindful of what we think we can do and then trying to improve on it. Variations on the theme, right? Another thing I think that just bears mentioning, sorry, my nose is so full. Another thing that bears mentioning is that life in general comes down to a series of decisions. A series of decisions made or not made. Okay, not doing a decision is a decision as well. Okay, but it's a series of decisions, and decisions can be hard. And some decisions might mean not doing something and saying no. Some decisions might be setting limits, right? Not anymore allowing everything to come in, everybody to come into your life and get some of your energy and so on. So decisions, it's a huge topic, and it's actually kind of the bread and butter of coaches, I think. As you work with individuals, it's like people have to decide what to focus on, which goals to pursue, what's important to them, what they're going to drop, and so on. So huge topic, right? And I think that some folks do not take this, are not that aware of this decision making. And a lot of decisions are made by rote. And made because other people would make them that way and so on, without really thinking about it and standing in their power and taking the responsibility for their choices very consciously. This is the decision I make, and and then I made it. I don't need to double check it, and I don't need to hindsight evaluate it and stuff like that. I made this decision given the information I had today.
Own it, in other words. Exactly.
Good word. Yes, own it. I will need to be.
Sure, go ahead. So one of the things when I think about what it takes for people to make a decision nowadays, I see that a lot of people don't want to be responsible of the choices that they make, right? And it's so easy to blame others. Let me tell you really quickly another story that I thought about that I realized, like, this is crazy. So there's this story right now going on. They're called the Murdoch murders. And this is a very prominent family in the South, and somewhere in the South, I think South Carolina or something like that. And the story, you can watch it on Netflix. It's the Murdoch murders, like I said. And it started with Murdoch Jr., typical, teenager with money, affluential children, a little bit irresponsible. He started drinking too soon, and alcohol makes you make decisions that are easily blamed on other things other than on yourself, right? But the story happens that he made a bad decision being drunk. He decided to ride his boat, and that boat has an accident, and one of the girls that they were with that night, a classmate, goes overboard, and they could not find her body but until a week after. And like these kind of things, there were many other crazy things happening with them as teenagers where there was no responsibility. Now, I'm going to stand back here, and although in FreudenFreude, we are about not judging or not shaming or anything like that, we are about owning our decisions and about making responsible choices. When you make a responsible choice, you have to be aware of what you are saying yes to. And then once you say yes to, what are the consequences of that? If you know that allowing your children to hang out with problem children, do you think that something good is going to come out of that? That's the story. Well, it turns out that not a single person in that story blames themselves for allowing their children to hang out with this kid. Everybody blames the Murdochs and not their choices. So as a coach, that is what I see. I see that there's no responsibility in the choices that you make. I see that there is no self-awareness of how you're sounding. I see that there was no ability to think about what you were saying yes to as a parent, as a child, and everything else. So when we say this is, before you can get back, let me say what I was telling Claudia the other day. I was telling her that thing that you see in Forrest Gump where he says life is a box of chocolates because you never know what you're going to get. I don't believe in that. I honestly now believe that our instincts, that our ability to make choices is constantly telling you yes to this and no to that. Yet we choose to not. I don't want to say listen, but choose to go with what's the worst that can happen. That is very true. What do you think, Claudia?
Oh, yeah, actually, I do think that life is kind of like a box of chocolates. You don't ever know what you're going to get, but you can always decide not to eat them. Right?
Yes.
You cannot open that box of chocolate. You can give it away. You can throw it away. You can eat just certain parts of it and so on. And those are the decisions I think that matters. You will not be able to be in chocolate control forever, but you can nevertheless kind of control what happens. And if you do
Yes.
too much of these chocolates, then you have to own the consequence of getting a sugar high or, sorry. So I think that yes, decisions have consequences, and there are also unintended consequences. There's stuff that can happen that was outside of our maybe reasoning or whatever as we were thinking about it, right? As you think, these are the positive things that can happen, these are the negative things that can happen. You know, one thing we call opportunity, the other thing we call the opportunity cost, and the threats and things like that. So the positive and the negative of going certain ways or not going certain ways. So as we look at that, there might be some items on that list that we just can't think of. You know, for instance, who could have thought COVID would happen? Right? You made certain decisions and so on, maybe to study a certain thing or take a certain job or open a coffee shop like 2 months before, you know, COVID.
How many? Yes.
Right? So there are unexpected things. There you have to grab deep into your resilience toolbox to manage things like that. So those things aside, I think that how many decisions do we make where we don't even think about the pros and the cons and the possibles and the, you know, the opportunity cost, and, you know, consciously sit down and take some time to think about it. Many things we don't, right? I think that is kind of this mindfulness to even be aware that, oh, this is a decision I'm taking, I am taking. And I do not allow my mother, my significant other, my work, whatever, for me. It is mine. And I think that this I like the phrasing of standing in your power, assuming your power, and the responsibilities that go with it. Putting this also quite negative, but if you take a decision and it works out, there is nothing more blissful than that. When you made it happen, when you took responsibility, you grabbed your courage together and did it anyway, even though you might have been somewhat uncomfortable or fearful or whatever, because that's the price of responsibility quite often, isn't it? And you know, it makes you grow, it makes you more confident, it makes you more able to take next steps after that and after that and after that.
Taking chances,
taking chances, because if you always outsource your decision making to people in your environment, to your employer, to Google and social media preferences, because how many people decisions just because it's the latest fad or the latest whatever.
Yep.
If it goes right, who do you give credit for? If it goes wrong, you just get upset at some unknown or outside of your self entity, because ultimately you became the victim because you allowed it to. You allowed it to. And so I think that there's this thing of just knowing that you are taking a decision, and that you want to take the decision,
right,
and get information from left and right, but you are going to take the decision. You're going to prioritize resources, time. You're going to have the ability to say no, even if everybody else tells you yes. You know, and that is just your decision, right?
At the end of the day, exactly. I think when I think about how it, I mean, let's be honest, Claudia, you and I, do you really think that you and I are people that make decisions without thinking about it? Like you were saying, You know, there's people that just sometimes say, I'm going to take the chance, I'm going to take the risk. But even in that moment when you and I take a risk or a chance on something, it's because you and I are using our past experiences on something, or we are relying on something kind of solid. It might be, let's say, fully integrated and formed, but there is a highly chance that it's going to go in your favor, right? Knowing you and I, we are going to take that chance and we're going to go for it. But when we don't take chances, and I'm going to speak now for me, I too sometimes doubt about myself. Like, we're not at all perfect. I wish I could take more risks. I wish I could take more chances. And I say I wish, because we all don't have our fixers, right? I wish I was my own fixer, where I can say, well, if this doesn't turn out, I'm just going to be able to fix it, do this and do that. And, you know, everything turns out fine, like nothing happened. Excuse me. But the truth is, I doubt myself sometimes, because I think, to me, at the end of the day, what really scares people is not knowing, no knowledge, period, no knowledge. And so that's why a lot of us, people like you and I, we go immediately for a book. We look for a book or something online that gives us at least an idea of what we're thinking is actually able, right? That exists.
We study.
Exactly. And that's where I think that sometimes a lot of people doubt themselves. Like, I can say again, my own experience, when I would doubt myself 5 years ago, was because I didn't read. I was expecting for God or something, you know, from somewhere to come and enlighten me and tell me this is where, no, things don't happen that way. You actually have to go out there in search of knowledge and get informed. And that way you can make your decisions, right? So if you're afraid of something, which is the basis of this story, right? Being able to manage life. Why? Because we are constantly afraid of everything. If we're not afraid of something, then it doesn't promote you to continue. What do you think?
Well, we do not need to look very far, my dear friend. If you remember, we had our first live on the 2nd of November last year. And yes, everybody, we have come every week since. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, but it was, and remember in October when we were discussing this show and everything, I was just like, you want us to do what? Because previously what I did is I recorded these Zooms and then would edit them. And frankly, there wasn't hardly anything really worth editing except maybe prettifying. I wasn't like cutting out whole sections of content or anything like that. But to hit that live stream and go unfiltered, whatever I say here is now for the world to see, and forever on some YouTube server. It took kind of this
step
confidence. It took this thing, and guess what? Every live is different, and you never know what's going to come up, and tech failures happen, and you know, you're sick or whatever, but you show up, and you do it anyway, right?
Exactly. Afraid or not afraid, we're here. And that's the message at the end of the day. Show up. We've said it how many times, Claudia? 100 times. You show up. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, because I think fundamentally, if we come back to the topic of this show, we have come this far because we know how to manage this life.
Pretty much, yeah.
Take a little bit of this emotional charge and the stress out. And just for 1 minute, just look at it. You're still getting up, you're still going to work or tending to your children or dealing with a financial crisis or studying really hard or whatever your life looks like right now, you're doing it. You might have expectations of how it should look, and maybe it should be all social media pretty and effortless, and it should all be not tiring, and maybe you should make more money, or you should. All of these things are assumptions and expectations that, where do they come from? I mean, manage okay so far. So what are the things that you should focus on going forward to make it that much more manageable, to make it that not comfortable, that's not the word I'm looking for, but rich, and not in terms of money, but rich as in fulfillment, as in capacity, as in living your values your way. So that's ultimately what we are after. And it's all grand talk. Sometimes you need a coach for that. Yeah. I have a coach. I talk to coaches a lot, peers. We help each other out. I would be surprised if you have a coach that you talk to. Sometimes we coach each other even, right? Yes. Because we all need that external, unbiased, non-judgmental person that creates this space for us where we just can be without judgment, without pressure, and just sit with ourselves. That's and not allowing in these filters and biases and presumptions and things like that. And so sometimes you need a coach, and that's okay. That's right. And I think it also, coaching is not remedial, people, right? Exactly. Coaching is to go from good to great to extraordinary. It's not to go from you're a loser to you're barely okay. Right? That's not what coaching is. It's like, stand in your power and become your best self, ultimately. Right. I think I'd like to quickly tell a story about a lady I'm in a group here in Saudi Arabia about, and she was asking, what should she do? In other words, she wanted to get divorced and she just wasn't sure. She told her story. I don't want to share more, but she told her story. And as I was looking into her story, I finished looking the story, and then I started looking at all the other comments. And I thought all the comments agree to what she's thinking. The thing is that sometimes when it comes to a moment of taking a decision, again, it comes to the responsibility that it means to take that first step, right? Unfortunately, this is a sad example, but nonetheless, it's an example. Most of the times, some of us don't know how to make a decision, not because we don't know what decision to take, but what is the first step towards that decision, right? And that is what a coach does. We don't persuade you into not making the decision, but into how, and we use what is natural to you, right? What you know and what you want to achieve. And so my question to her was very simple. Have you taken steps toward making the first decision? And she sent me a message and we started talking. Nothing about coaching, nothing like that. I didn't even think about that. But she told me, I know what I want. I was just looking for that. Incredibly, I was just looking for that thing that I had not thought about. What is going to be my first step? Where do I start?
because not all of us know where to start. And that's why you have all of these coaches, you know, the business coaches, the life coaches, training coaches, and all this kind of stuff, right? Based on what you want to achieve. So yeah, I mean, we're all not perfect. Making the first step is hard, but we have to rely on who we are and our humanity. I was thinking about so many people that I've seen make mistakes. And we see that on social media all the time, right? We see how people make good, bad decisions and all this kind of stuff. And we celebrate when somebody does something that is human possible without any difficulty. We've become this race where we celebrate common sense, because we're starting to see that people are lacking that. Now, again, common sense can mean a lot of things, but common sense is what the majority agrees that is right. In other words, right, in social media. So I was looking at somebody saying, when you're ready to make a decision, be sure that that decision is something that is not extraordinary, ridiculously outside than what is expected of you. If you're asking somebody to be empathetic, sympathetic, kind, gentle, then you're asking something ridiculously natural that should come from the person. Then you really need to step back and say, well, what kind of person am I dealing with that I have to ask this person to be this kind of person that should already be part of their humanity? So humans, we need to rely on ourselves. We need to really believe in what's coming into our brain and say, take the chance, do it. You know it. You study it. Claudia, how many times you have told me, you know, I've done this, I've done the research onto this computer, I've done the research of that, because if I get it correct, I laugh, because I am the kind of person that I will not buy a single piece of furniture if I've not already have spent at least 2 years researching what kind of ideal living room do I want. That's the kind of person I am. I do that research. I make sure I make the right decisions for me. What do you think?
Well, I think that kudos to you that you know how you function, right? I think that there's a lot of assumptions often happening that, you know, other people should be the same as us. I think that that's a big, huge fallacy, that just because we decide a certain way, just because we are empathic way and so on, right? I mean, then all of a sudden, because the majority of people behaves a certain way, like on social media, then all of a sudden that becomes kind of the standard.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that is also something that I would say, like, take stuff with a grain of salt, right? And I think that everybody, that's a firm belief of mine that also goes into my coaching personality. Everybody has strength in something. Everybody contribute in a certain way. And it might not be the way like everybody else. And maybe that's a very good thing, that it's in a different way. So, you know, let's explore that without bias, without prejudice, without judgment, and just see, like, what is this thing? This just brings up the story of, I was tutoring a young man. He was still, maybe he was still a teenager,
Okay.
late high school, let's say. And you know, he was suffering so much in school because the just normal educational system and the topics that were taught that way were really, really hard for him. And he was really having a hard time. And, you know, I gave him the support that he needed and so on. so at some point he's like, we were talking, and he wanted to become a furniture maker. He
Ah.
wanted to work with wood. That was his dream and stuff like that. And his parents were like, no, my son is going to, finish high school and go to his prestigious university and stuff like that. This poor guy was tortured literally for years because he had to double the years, he had to repeat the years, and it took him forever to get his high school and stuff like that. Long story short, ultimately he started doing furniture making as a hobby, and he is brilliant at it, right? So it's like, granted, when we're young people, we don't have necessarily the resources to stand on our own 2 feet and make our own decisions, and that's just reality. But I think that expectations, which here in this case were the societal implications of that high school and university meant a certain prestige, that was the way and the only way, rather than looking at this young person and allowing his strengths to come forth and to be displayed. So I am a firm believer that everybody can contribute in his or her own way, that has somewhere, and sometimes they might be tough to dig up because they might not be the cookie cutter mainstream kind of capabilities or gifts, really gifts. So I think that I wanted to actually go somewhere with this long story, but
I think it's
the thing is, looking at the person, but because see, the danger with being self-reflected and mindful of ourselves is that we tend to sometimes not value the input of other people. It's kind of the flip side of what I do as well, right? We shouldn't let other people's prejudices, judgments, and so on dictate too much of our decisions. On the other hand, I believe that it's very useful taking other people's my cats are going crazy here, I'm so sorry. Other people's opinions and maybe guidance and advice, research we do on topics, role models, and so on, all these things. Look outside of yourself in order to get more info.
Oh boy. Take your time. You okay? Oh, okay, time out. Okay. So I think when you said that story, I'm hoping that at some point he realized that not only was it a hobby, but it was his thing. So what happened with his parents? What was that thing that made him become his own persona? Or was there a good ending?
He was still a work in progress, right? Progress, because unfortunately all these years of not fitting in, of being less than, of struggling, really did a number on his self-esteem. And I haven't heard from him or about him in a number of years, and I hope that he ultimately was able to go his own way. So I can't tell you. I really hope that eventually he got into an environment that appreciated his thing, or at the very least, that he got solace and balance through his artistic woodworking work, that he was able to maybe do both. Maybe he was able to do the more traditional kind of work and then also do the other thing. I knew a gentleman knew a gentleman who was quite a fantastic pianist, and he had wanted to become a pianist, but you know, it's tough to be making a living as a pianist, so he became an engineer.
Oh
And
my God.
it was very clear in his life that his engineering job was the 9 to 5 job, and at 5 o'clock it was done, and then his real life started, and he would go home and he would do music and he would meet with other people and play and so on. And it was just a decision too. It was a decision, and maybe a good one for this person, because he was a good engineer. There was nothing wrong with his engineer, and I'm sure he enjoyed it to at some level, because we all enjoy the things we become good at, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that who knows if he had become a pianist and relied on the piano playing and you know, made it a business, right, of booking concerts and traveling and having it needing to be this, I have to succeed at this to survive kind of thing, he would have gotten much less enjoyment out of it, because all of a sudden it became a business. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, who knows which decision is ultimately the good decision or the better one. We can't know. And so, you know, sometimes we make trade-offs. We make trade-offs. Like, yes, I want to do music, but guess what? Reality kind of says that I become a, bless you, I become a engineer with a stable job, and he was a very stable job. So he obviously was good at his engineering craft, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but the music is who I am outside of work. And
Claudia.
so
I'm sorry. I just had to like breathe, because you just made it made me remember something that happened over the weekend, that we were supposed to be on vacation, but we were more on sick vacation than anything else. So on the night before coming back to Saudi Arabia, we went to a nice steakhouse that the hotel has. And we were there, you know, looking pretty and all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah. And the pianist she walks in, and she's this girl with how do they call them? Dreadlocks. You know, there's the hair that looks very Jamaican and all that kind of stuff. She's blonde, white skinned, and everything else. And I looked at her, and I saw her sitting there playing the piano in this nice restaurant, in this nice hotel. And I started thinking, zero judgment, just thinking, is this how she saw her life happen? Is she, did she study to play piano? Or is this something that she learned how to do? Is this what she wanted? Does she have a career on the side? Because here's the thing that caught my attention. The day before, we were in another restaurant that is right across the hall from the steakhouse, that is a pasta place. And she passes by with a bottle. She's shaking the baby bottle. And my husband is like, oh, she was passing with a baby bottle. And I thought, she has a baby. And I thought, so how does she do this? So, you know, you start thinking about other people. You start thinking about their life choices. Is this something that they wanted? I don't know. You know, like you were saying the story about the pianist. And, you know, some people just want to live. They don't want anything other than to just have a simple life. And we all think that life has to be about hustling and working and doing all these kind of things, when maybe for her, maybe she has a PhD, but this is how life has worked for her perfectly well. What doesn't tell me that her husband is this wonderful guy in this company, that he has an amazing position, and she at night just to do something, she goes out and plays.
I mean, and I think that we should not judge. That's my takeaway from the story, is we do not know other people's circumstances, and we might surface layer in one moment of time, in one context, and we cannot possibly grasp the complexity of their existence. And I, for one, always feel so extremely privileged when I get to know a little bit more about my coaching clients. And
yes.
when they share with me maybe some deeper desires and preferences and hard decisions that they had to take, or they allow me to be part of a little part of their journey, it's truly a privilege. It's nothing I'm ever in my life going to take for granted. And so, that is like these things, this managing daily life is complex. So I think if I had to summarize, oh my God, brains on. So if I had to summarize, trust yourself a little bit more, make decisions based on who you are, while taking into account how other people do it and what might be expected of you, but make your own decision. And live with the consequences, whatever they may be. Allow yourself to fail. Stretch yourself just a little bit. Ask for help if you need it, from a coach, a friend, or whatever. And, it might not be as hard. And sometimes saying no is perfectly all right.
I think so too. I'm gonna go with what I was listening to somebody say the other day, that I've lived life. I sometimes feel that I've lived a long life now. Like when I watch a TV series or something like that, I tell my husband, oh, I already know what's going to happen. And I start telling him, he starts laughing. He's like, that's what's just happening right now. Well, we as humans, there's a reason why we exist and expire, right? And that is to live life the way you want to live it, because it's so short. It really is. When you least expect it, when you least expect that baby that you were carrying, tomorrow is going to tell you, what's wrong with you, Mom? You're embarrassing me with my friends. They no longer want to be carried. And then you're here worried about all these other things. You stopped living, you stopped doing this, and you stopped doing that. I think at the end of the day, if you own your life and you are very clear on your values and beliefs, you are going to own your life and you're going to live it the best way possible. And there's going to be zero regrets, which is what a lot of us want to feel. Zero regrets. That's how I want to end.
Good. You do you, zero regrets, and own it.
Thank you so much.
We got through it.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in. I hope that you got some value out of it. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. Give us some love with likes and comments. We always want to hear from you. And if you have any particular subjects or ideas about how to help your brain to manage daily life, let us know. And we might very well pick this topic up again in a future show. So please get in touch.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely day and feel better.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye.